Hello, everybody. I thought I would make a video kind of as a guide to how I can use data to help drivers find their weak spots on a racetrack and just generic tips and tricks when you're looking at data. Now, we're going to be comparing a driver who is a lot faster to a driver that's a lot slower. In fact, this lap is a 126 for the slower driver, and the faster driver is a 122.9. This is my fast lap versus another driver that shared data with me over the weekend. This driver is not using all of the racetrack in a lot of corners, and we're going to look at that first. But there's two specific corners at Thompson, which is the track we're looking at. This is from championship weekend, the last race we had in New England, that really catch a lot of drivers out. And multiple drivers shared their data with me over the weekend or after the weekend. And looking at the data, it seems that everybody's having trouble with a couple of corners here. And every racetrack has that. Every racetrack has a crux or a couple of corners that are difficult, and then a couple of corners that are pretty straight up where most people are, usually doing things correctly. Turn one at Thompson is a 90-degree corner. Most people have a good idea of how to take a just straight 90-degree corner. And then there's a couple of corners here, like turn three, which we're going to talk about, which is a lot more difficult. Even though it's just a sweeping left-hander, it's blind, and it's got an interesting exit to it that opens up a lot. So let's initially, one of the first things I noticed about this driver, and a lot of you guys are doing it too, is you're just not using all the racetrack. And that sounds so simple and like such a generic racing thing, but it's one of those things that we all know we should do. And then when you put on the helmet or you go back and watch your video, you find out you're not doing it, right? So let's just look at the lines here in a couple of these corners. And this is AIM's Race Studio 3 software. It's using a GPS satellite image of the racetrack. It never lines up quite perfectly, so the lines might look like we're driving off the side of the track a little bit. And of course, GPS data isn't always perfect, but the AIM system, especially their newer systems with dual satellites, are really within a foot or two usually. So, but here we can see I'm the fast lap, which is from my data, is the green line, and the slower lap is the red line. So going into turn one, we see the green line is further to the left, further to the outside, getting down to the apex. And again, ignore that the image is slightly off. We're not really driving in the middle of the road, but we can use this as a good example of where we're at on the racetrack, or reference for where we're at on the racetrack. So either way, you can see the green line starts out wider, cuts in tighter, and then exits wider as well. So I'm just using more of the racetrack than this red line. Again, I'm starting out wider into turn two. I'm coming in tighter. And coming into turn three, I'm not coming out wide here because I'm getting ready for the next corner. This is a flat corner, so there's not really anything to learn here. This is one of the big corners we're going to talk about in a minute. But you can see that I'm starting out wider. I'm coming in tighter to the apex, and then I'm using more of the racetrack on the exit. And it's just a continuous problem we see with this driver. They're not using all the racetrack. So again, I'm starting out wider, I'm coming in tighter, and then I'm exiting wider as well. The red line is just staying more in the middle of the racetrack and not using all the racetrack. I like to tell drivers to use what I call the KISS method. And the KISS method is to kiss the entry curb, kiss the apex curb, and kiss the exit curb. So there's three curbs, or 3 points to every corner. There's an entry, an apex, and an exit. And whether or not there's a curb there, it doesn't matter. There usually is. I want drivers to concentrate on touching each one of those curbs. If you can do that, it doesn't matter how slow you're going to go doing it. You're going to use way more of the racetrack, and then the speed will come because the car will feel like it's so much easier to drive. You're not fighting the car, trying to get it to turn when it doesn't want to turn because you're starting out much too narrow, much too shallow going into the corner, and then getting the car to turn and then pushing on exit. The car is just never going to be happy. So if you can use all the racetrack, the speed will come naturally. So on like this hairpin corner, on the entry, the first thing you want to do is concentrate on touching that outside curb on the entry. Then touching the apex curb, I want you to run a wheel right over it if you have to. And then touching the outside curb on exit. So kiss. 3 curbs, every corner. And trying to remember that for every corner of the racetrack is difficult. So I always tell drivers, especially when we're looking at data, to concentrate on one corner. Let's pick your worst corner and let's work on that. And usually those are your biggest gains. You're going to gain a half a second in some of your worst corners. Like I think if we look at the time delta, just in turn 3 here. So entering turn 3, I'm at about half a second ahead of this driver by turn 3. And by the time we get through turn 3, I'm at over a second, maybe 1.2 seconds. So we're talking about a half a second or more in this corner, one corner for this driver right here. And so when we're looking at this data too, we can see that there's a big separation between the green line and the red line right here. And that's what we're looking at. These are the big difference corners, right? Breaking into this corner, this is turn 1 after a straightaway, we're more similar. In this corner, we have a much wider gap. So it's different, and that's where the speed is lost. You can see at the bottom chart here too. This is a time compare chart. My line is the red line, or excuse me, the green line, and that's what I'm gaining off of the red line. The red line is the slower lap, so that's staying consistent. And then as the green line drops, it's time that I'm gaining on that lap compared to the red line lap. So turn 3 here at Thompson and coming into the S's and through the S's are the 2 most difficult corners here. And that's where all drivers, if I look at anybody's data, this is where they're losing time. When you get really close to running the lap times that I'm running, there's more nuances to it. But if you share your data with me, I can look at it and confirm that these are the 2 places where you're losing time. So let's jump into turn 3 and talk about how most drivers are not utilizing the racetrack here and losing time because of it. So again, this driver's coming in shallow. They're not using all the racetrack. They're not using that KISS method. They're not touching that outside curb on entry. They're not getting down to the apex. And then they're definitely not using the exit. And the exit of turn 3 at Thompson is where drivers really struggle. It's blind when you're coming into turn 3 and you're coming even at the apex. You can't really see the exit, and there's a lot of track out here. It's a misleading corner. It seems like it's more than 90 degrees, and if I zoom out here, you can see that the track continues to turn left just a little bit after this apex. And so people are struggling and trying to get the car back to the left-hand side, especially to set up for the next corner, which is the hairpin. And they're not letting the car run out to use more of the curb. So again, in the data, we'll see it's more than a half a second, as I explained before, a big difference here. So let's look at the braking point for this driver. Here's his peak speed coming into that corner. And they're slowing down at the very start of this curb. Okay, so you can see our dots are lined up here. And then if I zoom in on this data, we can see they start slowing down just a hair earlier than me, but I mean, that's really close to the same position. I'm slowing down another car length further into it, but that's because I know I can use the racetrack and I have the confidence to carry the speed through. So I'm not as concerned about that. They'll gain that confidence if they start using all the racetrack. The next thing I'm looking at here is the minimum speed. So here's where I'm at my minimum speed. And look at that. It's well before I even get to my car is even lined up with this left-hand apex curbing. So this is at my slowest point. I started slowing down at the very beginning of the curb. I slowed down to here, just brushing the brake pedal, not really hammering the brakes. And then I'm on the gas. So from this point, as you can see, I've stuck my right foot back on the gas pedal and I'm accelerating through this corner. So you always want to accelerate through the apex, right? We always hear that. People always say that when they talk about racing. Use all the racetrack, accelerate through the apex. These are all just common things that every race car driver should know, and everybody thinks they're doing it, but when we have the data, we can show you that you're not. And it's really eye-opening for a lot of people. So this driver, their minimum speed is here. And you can see, look at that. That's almost at the exit of the corner. So they're well past the apex of the corner. They're at the exit. This is where they've decided to put their foot down, their right foot down. So that's a massive, massive difference in positioning. And again, this is more or less because they don't have the confidence. If they had confidence, they would put their foot down much earlier and get on the accelerator back here. Probably because this is a little bit of a blind corner, and I'll show you some video of it. But so their minimum speed is here. They've started accelerating, and they're going to accelerate from there on out. Now, what they're not doing is using all of the racetrack over here. So this exit or this crossover road right here is really there's no curbing. Like I said, for the KISS method, so entry curb, apex curb, exit curb. There's no exit curb here, but there is this runoff area or crossover road. So let's take a look at the video. So this is from that same session, or it might be a different session, but the same weekend anyway. So we're entering turn 3. And you're going to see me using all the racetrack. I'm on the right-hand side of the racetrack. If I'm not touching that curb, if I'm not on top of that curb, I'm at least touching the curb here. And I'll go frame by frame. And as we can remember, I'm starting to slow down about a car length into this curbing. So right here, I'm probably touching the brake. I don't have data overlaid to show that, but we can see my front suspension starting to squat. So right there, you can see the front suspension starting to squat. So we know I'm on my brakes. So we're on the brakes here. And then about right here, after I've turned in, I'm going to start accelerating. So just because I have a lot of confidence in the car, I've driven a lot of laps here, I know where this is going to take me. So I'm accelerating here. We're getting down to the apex curb. And you can see I don't touch the curb. I get very close to it. And this, you could call this a mistake. You don't really want it to, I don't really want to touch the curb too much in this case to upset the car because it's such a fast corner. But we get as close as we can possibly get to it. And then I'm going to open up my hands and I'm going to drive the car to the apex. And when I say, exit curbing. When I say open up my hands, I'm going to start straightening the wheel out. So my hands are turned left to get to this apex curb. We're coming away from that, and we're going to start turning the wheel further to the right, opening up the hands, driving it to the exit. And right there is where I consider the exit curb of this. This is where I want to be. I really want my right tires to be touching that black line on the road, or somewhere near this cutover road. I don't even get all the way there on this particular lap, but that's what you want to do. You want to drive the car out to that exit. And as you can see, again, like I said, this is blind because we're kind of going uphill here. So here's the view from the apex. This is why people are struggling with this corner. I mean, you just don't know. Of course, you've done laps here, but you just don't know exactly where the exit is. You can't visually see it. And people are slowing down and not driving the car out to the exit like they should be. There's a lot of road out here they can use. So in other drivers' cases, at this point, they're probably still turning the wheel left. They're concerned about keeping the car on the road. They keep their hands turned left more, and that's causing the front end to push. And so they feel like they have to slow down more. I don't have video from this other driver, but I would bet that because they were not accelerating until about this point in the corner, I bet they were not accelerating because they couldn't see where they were going, and their tires were turned left even more than I was at the apex because they were pushing the car. So the front end was just pushing. They were trying too hard to make the car to turn left, and they weren't driving it out. So by driving it out, you just really have to drive the car a little straighter, and it will gain a lot of grip, and you can drive it all the way out to the edge of the track. So let's watch that full speed here. So here I am coming out of turn 1, touch the brakes, on the gas, down to the apex, and all the way out to the exit. And if this turn is a problem for you, there's more than half a second to be gained there. All right, let's look at the other big crux that people struggle with at this racetrack, and that would be coming off of the oval and into the S's. So we're going to zoom in on this portion of the data. Okay, so here's an example of the S's. We're going to take a look at the S's coming off of the back straightaway oval, over the crest here, and then into this S section. And a lot of drivers are struggling with this. It's mostly just coming off of the oval. And I think it's an area where, again, it's a blind trajectory. Where you're coming over this crest, you can't really see where you're going. And drivers are struggling with that. So first, let's look at maximum speed entering the corner. So this driver's maximum speed entering the corner is here. And that is well before the crest. And here is my maximum speed entering the corner. Which, again, this GPS is not, the image isn't lined up too perfectly. So I carry the throttle over this little crest, or at least to the top of it, before I start slowing down. So I would say my maximum speed, really, for visual reference, is really about here. Right there. Either way, we know that this driver is slowing down back here, and I'm starting to slow down here. You need to carry more speed. You need to carry the throttle up over this crest, even though it's a blind corner and it can be a little scary, and slow down less. So they're slowing down earlier. They're slowing down more in coming into this section. And then we're going to look at the line. So again, I'm starting out wider, and then I'm coming in we're actually right on top of each other. In fact, this driver is a hair to the left more than I am here. So I call this a sacrificial corner, this first S. Let me make this bigger. You don't really care too much about hitting the apex here. You just need to get the car over to this point to get ready for this right-hander, because after this right-hander, your throttle pedal should be flat for the next corner and the rest of the straightaway. really, I would tell this driver just try carrying more speed, build up your confidence coming over this crest with your throttle flat to the floor, and then slowing down. Now, this is a higher consequence corner because there's barriers and wall closer to the racetrack. So if I was working with this driver at the racetrack, I would really concentrate on turn 3 and discuss other areas of the track because they're less consequential, and then talk about the possibility of working up to this. It's a little bit scarier because it's blind and there's a wall that's close to the racetrack, and you're going to have to approach this, especially with a driver that's more timid, a little bit slower. But just try carrying more speed into this corner and coming out a little bit wider to use more of the racetrack. Again, with my line, we can say we're using the KISS method. So I'm starting on the outside. I'm getting closer to the curb or a similar position of the curb, but this is really the apex of this corner because it's a late apex because it's a sacrificial corner. So you can get tight into this corner. And then exiting this corner doesn't really have a apex or exit curb rather, but you're getting down to the apex here. And you can see I'm getting way further down to this apex than this driver's in the red line. So I'm just using a lot more of the racetrack. So if you're struggling at Thompson, these are the two corners that I commonly see everybody struggling with. Turn 3 and the S's, or coming onto the S's, or coming into the S's, the back section here. It's unfortunate iRacing doesn't have this racetrack, but New Hampshire Motor Speedway is on the iRacing service, and it's the configuration that we run. So you can use iRacing as well to do the same thing, to start practicing looking at data. In iRacing, you can collect telemetry. There's lots of guides online on how to do that. So look it up and then choose your favorite software to use. You can actually use this Aim Race Studio software as well. And you can start looking at data at, say, New Hampshire Motor Speedway in iRacing, and then compare that to real life. And I guarantee the same corners you struggle with in real life, you're going to struggle with in iRacing. And that will get you started familiarizing yourself with looking at data and then improving or learning how to improve your driving using it. You can always ask me for help. If I'm at the racetrack, I'm happy to share my data. I don't really consider it a secret. Everybody deserves to be able to learn and drive faster. So I hope this helps some of you guys who are dipping a toe into looking at data. I'm not an expert by any means, but there's an easy way for us to compare and look at a driver that's faster versus a driver that's second slower. There's going to be large differences in the data that are easy to pick out, and we can find a lot of time that way. And I'm always happy to share my data with anybody at the racetrack, or even go over your data. If you have an AIM system, just talk to me and I'll come over with my laptop. I can download it within a few seconds and probably pick out some major differences. But 99% of the drivers at the racetrack, it's at Thompson, are going to be struggling with these same two corners with the same two problems. So just use this video. Obviously, it's the end of the year, but use this video before we go back to Thompson next year, and hopefully you'll learn something from it. So, all right, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the racetrack.